What's up, peeps? What a fun episode I have in store for you today. My guest, Michael David Chapman, is one hell of a straight shooter, which is what I love about him. He's the man to go to when you want to grow your business, but he's also the go-to guys guy, helping men break through their internal issues and transform, something I'm sure we'll be touching on today. And if that wasn't enough, he's helping brands explode on LinkedIn through targeted lead generation and content strategy optimization. Mr. Legit himself, Michael David Chapman. Thanks for being on, man.
Thanks for having me, Frank. How are you?
Awesome.
You're not too far from my home, by the way.
I know, we could have hopped in the car.
I could have just drove down and done it in the office there.
Man. So before we jump into it all, I know about you, learned about you, have been able to actually work with you, which has been awesome. So gotten to get to know you a little bit, but through LinkedIn, I met you. You got a massive following on LinkedIn, which is awesome. And one thing I love about you, like I mentioned, is you're not afraid to go against the grain or to just, hey, everything I put out there is going to be politically correct. So you're not afraid to challenge stuff, which is what I love. And I hope that we get to touch on some of that stuff today, but give us a glimpse into a day in the life of you and who you are, what makes you tick, what that fire is inside of you that really gets you going every morning.
Yeah, I mean, a day in the life begins with a beehive of activity. Even though I've got a couple of, my two oldest they're still here and they can sort of do for themselves. It's still fatherhood, no matter what the age is, and I think it's that way until they leave, even after they leave. But so really busy with that. But in my professional life, it's a lot, my work has really evolved into, when it's not working with men and men's issues, it's really evolved to more of a strategist on the platform and helping people on LinkedIn. But really one of the ancillary things that happens by default is talking about their business, not just their brand, but how is their brand converting to what they really want from a revenue perspective. And so I don't talk a lot about it, but that's what happens really behind the scenes more than anything.
Yeah, good. And that's, I feel like that's like a good thing because people are coming to you and I'm sure you're working with a lot of people, especially bigger name influencers out there on the platform where it's like, you and your organization are behind some of this amazing stuff that they're doing. So, but that's all good, man. No worries there. It's,
a lot of that is, a lot of the people we work with, they're really interested in converting influence. And so while a large influence may have value, a lot of times it doesn't. It's in terms of numbers, and it's more about how they take the influence and clearly state their brand message, their value proposition, and convert. Because to me, at this stage in the game, influence without conversion of some kind of benefit, for the influencer, if you want to use that, it doesn't seem to work in the long term. It's what have been my experience.
I believe that. Absolutely. I mean, if you have this big persona or whatever it is, and you're not converting it into something that you have to monetize. You got to make money. We can't just live on just followers and friends.
Dope.
Yeah.
Dope.
Yeah. All right. So how did you get started? I mean, tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah.
How you got to where you are today, and that's something that I'm sure we'd love to hear because I know that you're not afraid to share stuff. So give us a little insight there.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, I'll go way back, but like my first position, like real job was in a position of leadership. I was a frontline supervisor, managing. Not a lot of leading. I was trying to lead, but managing people that were older than me, more mature, more experienced. And so that was like, learning by fire, trial by fire, and so I stayed in organizational and then eventually evolved to more of sales leadership and general management roles over the past 25 plus years until I got to a point where, I was always working for someone, and the conflict that was sometimes self-induced or more cultural was just this disconnect between wanting to see the team, the people be more important than the result. And so I lost a lot along the way until I got tired of losing that battle and really putting the team that I was serving, that quote unquote worked for me, ahead of potential results. And so when you do that, especially in a privately held environment where you're working directly for an owner, there can be conflict because, you're sort of creating a subculture of how you want to see people evolve and progress and how that benefits the top and bottom line. And that's not always aligned. 2 years ago, I decided it was enough. I gave, a notice to an organization without a job in hand. And the same day I did that, I ended up working out a 4-month notice, but the same day I did that, I came on, got on LinkedIn to look for a job. And that's where it started. I started to repurpose a lot of things that I had learned and written for the last couple of years onto the platform and noticed, wow, there's a lot of guys, a lot of people struggling with some of the same stuff. And so it just kind of took off from there.
Awesome. So before I get into, just because you said something that I think is really key for the audience, and I want to just touch on a little bit more, if we could, is you said something that's really, I think, important because people are in careers, people are stuck, and that's really what I want people listening. I want to know that you don't have to be stuck. And it seems like you had your, come into Jesus moment, your aha moment, whatever you want to call it, and you were like, no more. Like you didn't have, it seems, and you can correct me, but it seems like you didn't have this huge plan in place. You're like, okay, I know I'm going to do this, 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 and this. You put your notice in because you were like, I need a new version of me, and I'm starting today. And I feel like you drew that line and took that leap. And so many people are petrified to take that leap. So if we could just dial that back a little bit, is that correct? Did you have enough?
Yeah, that's exactly right. But I had people. I mean, I remember 2 weeks before I did that, one of my best friends, what I'd really call a mentor, I mean, he like grabbed me by the we were on like the 15th green of a golf course. And I'm hemming and hawing and what could happen. And, I'm rebuilding my life and, because I'd come through a second divorce. And he grabbed me by the shoulders and he's like, grit his teeth. He's like, just effing leave. Because I was talking myself out of it, what am I going to do? I'm over 40, what's it going to look like? Just all in all this fear. So I had help. I didn't just I had a lot of help and there was a lot it was probably, I don't regret doing it when I did it, but I was probably more ready 2 years prior to that to do it than I really realized. Cause it was just that when he did that, I had some other affirmations after that sort of by the shoulders moment from another couple of mentors. And it was like, this is so clear. I've been living in fear this whole time and I'm not doing that anymore. So I think to your point, people have to stay stuck. They don't have to stay stuck. And everyone says, hey, just quit your job. And I get that. I totally respect that. But not everyone's wired the same. And so the conditioning that I had and experiences I had and losses I had coming into that season, really what was happening was the death of the fear. What am I going to do? I've got 4 kids. I'm a single father. Boo hoo hoo. Like, what am I going to do? Right. That was that moment that I had to stay stuck until I could hear and see that what was keeping me in that place wasn't the job, wasn't providing, wasn't any of that. It was deep-rooted fears that had been there for 40 plus years.
Got it. Great.
I don't know if I answered it, but that's really, I needed to be jerked up.
Sometimes we need that. I love how you said it. It's like the grabbed by the shoulders moment. We need that. So glad. Thank you for expanding that. So knowing, in your journey and before your, shoulder moment and where you're at, you've worked with a lot of people. You've worked with, specifically, I know a lot of brands, a lot of companies, a lot of individuals, and knowing that what you get to do every day. What is that in seeing things? If you could give our listeners one piece of advice, hey, open up the brain of Michael David Chapman and we're gonna grab something out of there. What's the one piece of advice you would give to someone tuning in that looking back on your life, you'd love to share?
Lessons. I also give you 2. I was thinking about that question. Sometimes I forget that just because we quote unquote have learned a lesson doesn't mean that we're not going to relearn that. And what I mean by that is, and I say this from being a father, like my oldest son is 20, he'll be 21 next year. All right. And so when you're raising, a human, the lessons that you think you've learned when he was quote unquote 6, sometimes they show up. It's not that you have to relearn it, but it's the same challenge or challenge with your child. In this case, he's an adult child. In a different season, he's changed his experiences, the failures, the losses, the wins on both sides. So the first piece I'd say as it relates to parenting when you think you've learned a lesson, always put a comma there and learn to say, I'm learning. Because, I learned, always put me in a position where there was more from a relational perspective that I hadn't learned, especially from a parenting perspective. In terms of the business side, we touched on at the beginning, the LinkedIn platform, in my estimation, in my opinion, is in a gold rush. I mean, it's on the upslope. There's a lot of competition for attention. That's not going to get any quieter. And so one thing I didn't do that I wouldn't say I wasted time, but I didn't understand how important it was to convert. I was just putting out content, was growing, meeting a lot of people supporting me, all this stuff. Part of that was I didn't know what I wanted to do after I left the job. But at the same time, I would have done well to have maybe some accountability from a business coach or somebody that would have been like, okay, this is great, but let's build out, not just from a monetary perspective, but really, and this probably leads to your upcoming question, where you want this to look in 5 years. I wasn't doing that. And maybe that was because I took such a big step of crazy faith to walk away from it. I mean, no one walks away from a job without one, typically. That's not even sound career advice. But maybe I was reeling in that a little bit. So influence, for the most part, is great. But without an end game, it seems to be pretty loose. And it will take time from relationships that really matter. That's the number one thing I'd say as it relates to, LinkedIn.
Got it. Good. And so with that and taking kind of that into mind with your advice, what is the thing that really keeps you going? That, people, you hear passion, follow your passion, and, you got to do it with passion, and which I get it. You have to be enthusiastic about what you do. I love what I get to do every day. And looking at you and what you get to do in working with people, what is that fuel? What's that like? Oh, this is it. This is that thing that really gets me going. And this is why I love doing what I do.
Yeah. I mean, it's the relationships. It's great to grow the business. It's great to close. It's great to see an entrepreneur, start at, this place and build influence and build their business. But really, because we work with our clients week in, week out, I mean, it's in this capacity, typically 100% on Zoom and across the world. It's the relationships. That's a huge sort of unintended ancillary benefit that happens. You get to know people. They get to know me. I'll be sitting here and, my youngest will walk in, and of course, he's probably hungry or wants something. I mean, they meet the family. And so it's the relationships, the connectivity that I think that I enjoy the most. That's that I think, I'm going to grow my business, but really intrinsically keeps me going is the relationships.
Good. And I feel like the relationship piece is important, because if someone, you get to know people, really get to know people, because it's like, how much do we all really know each other? There's an extent to how well you can know someone, but to peel back some of that behind the facade and be below those couple additional layers, you do get to understand, hey, I'm a family guy, I got this, I go through this, and all these other things. I feel like you relate to them, and that really builds solid, tight relationships. And then to be able to work with someone and see, like, hey, remember a year ago we were here and you were like, I was so frustrated. Now 12 months later, you're seeing growth and right. Seeing change. So it is exciting, and that's.
And look, and in fairness, I've been doing this for 2 years, right? There's been some failures. I mean, what I look to do, I think, consciously now is really build margin in those business relationships. So when there is a disconnect or a piece of content didn't quite resonate as intended, as we planned, you have margin, you have overlap, so that people can be heard and we can adjust to not just help build the business, but really build the connect or strengthen the connection.
So on the flip side of that, if we look at so we know what fuels you. We know what you really love. If there's one thing that you're like, I see this all the time, whether it's something in your everyday business and what you're doing, or if it's something that you see in folks you work with, if there's the thing that you can change, and I'm sure there's all these different things, you're like, I changed this, I changed that, but if there's that one big thing where like, you know what, if I could give this to someone and have them say, don't do this, or this is a misconception, what would that thing be?
Specifically, what area? The business, the platform, or in general?
I would say we can narrow it down and say in the platform. That would be great, because I feel like anyone tuning in, if you want to be in B2B and you want to build the relationships, I feel like LinkedIn is where it's at right now. I feel like it is on the growth, and people need to be paying attention to it. So if you look at LinkedIn, let's pick that. I love that. Let's pick the thing that you would say, don't do that.
Yeah. Don't put a lot of stock in the numbers. I've been pretty vocal about, when people say, hey, I don't care about the metrics. It's like, come on, man. Don't be in denial, but don't put Don't put too much stock in it, because it's fleeting. We're seeing it. Corey Warfield's talking about it all the time. I'm going to guess on the average, if you just take 1,000 followers, I'm throwing out minimum 3 to 5% are complete, not legit profiles. All you gotta do is scroll your following list. So you got to look at that and have balance. But on the other side, I think you had mentioned it, like views. Views are the vehicle. Like if you don't have views, like no one's going to read it. And like, why are you posting in the first place? Whether it's just you want to contribute to thought leadership, you want to, sometimes give back what you've learned, or you're growing your business. So there's just, have somebody, if you're just starting out or you're stuck with LinkedIn around the content and what it all means, having somebody help you, understand that and find that balance. I didn't do that, is what I'm really saying. The first 6 months, man, it was like the wild, wild west. I remember the days before they really made some changes last spring where, like a bad day was, 100,000 views on a text post. What? Like I had no, and it affected, I'll be clear, it affected relationships personally. Because you go from like, a Facebook post of your kids, you're getting, hey, family likes it, to, all of a sudden. So having that balance before you really start, rolling with a strategy, I think is important. And I think sometimes you got to ask for help. Not too much stock in the numbers, but don't be in denial. No one's here posting to not get attention. No one's doing that.
You got it, right, and that's why I love. That's why I keep it real, man. It's what I love, and you tell it how it is. Mm-hmm. Where are we going? Where where we're at today? You said, okay, you've been doing this for 2 years, so you've seen a lot. Video on LinkedIn, I think, is just about 2 years old. So it hasn't been around forever, but there's other vehicles, of course, outside of just LinkedIn. But where we're at today, knowing kind of like, okay, this is a land grab right now, specifically, when we talk about LinkedIn and stuff, but 5 years from now, or, even longer, give you a chance to be historically correct here. Where are we going to be? Where do you think, your vision and seeing things, where are we going?
I'll give you two things. So the LinkedIn, then I'll give you a personal example that the person was starting to scare me. In full disclosure. So on the platform, I would say, I think the direction is, in 5 years, the attention that quote unquote someone is getting today, it'll look differently. And I think it'll be more geared towards ad spend. And I think this is just an opinion. If you look at sort of the way they're doing LinkedIn Live, it's like this, you have to apply for it. And I think, I think that's smart. I think the technological pieces, for people that have live, is a bit third rate at times. They need to make that easier for people that have it. But that's an example of trying, or even maybe accomplishing, exclusivity for a product or service. I think they're smart to do that. But I think the attention you're getting today on like this post right here is going to look, you're going to have to, content creators or people that produce and share content, they're going to have to continue to up their game. And then I think at some point, it really will be, if you're using content to grow your business, it's going to be more like Facebook for sure. If you were an early adopter, like you're an early adopter. Right now, 600 million plus followers. That's still so small compared to their competitors. So that's the first thing. personally, I was talking about my kids, like I'm starting to think about, 5 years. It's not quite 5 years, probably more like, my son turns 11 today. So in 8 years, if I can add 3, I'm going to be facing, I can't believe I'm saying this, but like empty nest stuff. What does it look like when, getting kids out the door for school and, teenage stuff, and, what is my life? What do I want it to look like on the other side of that? I want to start having those conversations on the whiteboard now before I wake up and, I don't know, I reach a whole different level of challenges and, what my professional and personal life looks like. So, I would say in 5 years, come back to me historically. Okay, Michael, what's your plan in the next week? Because your youngest is, going to be 18 then. So maybe that's 7 years. Did I get that right? 7 years. Yeah, 7 years. Sorry.
Yeah. So,
but, well, it may be 8 because some of them stay longer, which is fine. Yeah. But yeah, that I think is a challenge for me to consider what I want that to look like.
Yeah, and what the world's going to look like then too. It's so great. I mean, I have a 7-year-old daughter, and it's wow. You think about where we're going and how things are now, what their lives are going to be like. So it's
Well, you do the math. You go 4 kids times 18 years. If they all don't leave at 18, but I mean that's a lot of time and mindset that all of a sudden theoretically cuts off. And it's not like when they turn 18, they're out, but I'm just saying like their presence, the drama, trauma, hangups, noise, emotional picks at each other and stuff. I mean, all that goes away, So I don't want to create a situation. I don't want to be on the non-plan there. I don't want to create a vacuum, an intentional vacuum. So in 5 years, I need to have a plan for that emotionally.
Yeah. We get the whiteboard going, man. And happy birthday to your son, no doubt. So where can we find you? So someone wants to learn more about you. Maybe it's just, personal wise, want to be in touch and follow you, or just learn more about you, or they want to learn more about how to up their strategy and really start crushing it on
LinkedIn, an email, a direct connect. I try to keep up with the messages and, typically, and like that, the advice goes that, still, I think 99% of connection requests are still not personalized, which is fine. I take no offense to that, but, a direct message, with a request or interest in that is certainly, and I try to do, people follow me. I try to get on there and follow back and, so try to reciprocate that, but LinkedIn.
Got it. All right. So thanks so much for being on. Really appreciate you opening up, and not just, I love the fact that you didn't just keep it all business. You touched on some family stuff. I feel like a lot of us tuning in, we have the other side of us, the family life and things that we try to balance. And those are real issues. So really appreciate you touching on that. Thanks so much for being on, and cannot wait for this to drop. Anyone tuning in, you got any questions, let us know. Happy to answer them.
Thanks for having me, Frank. Stay warm.
Yeah.